If you'd like to discuss issues raised in this episode and episodes of the future, we always have a Discord link down in the description below. You can join the conversation, and we will, in the future, post information about episodes prior to the episodes airing, where we can get your audience feedback and critique, interest, what you think about it, different perspectives on the issues. As well, we're going to be taking audience submissions for ideas that you'd like covered on the show, stories you'd like covered. Maybe there's someone that you want me to debate or have a discussion with, or just watch their video and critique it in real time. That is all welcome and more at the Free Thought Left Discord server. Join us in the conversation and help us make a more free thought left. Thanks, guys. So Bernie Sanders unveiled his education plan, and he has an interesting name, calls it the Thurgood Marshall Plan for Education, named after the key lawyer that was fighting in the Brown versus Board of Education case, which ultimately desegregated or made it unconstitutional to segregate schools in the U.S. and led to, a lot of incredibly positive changes in terms of integration. So this is an extensive plan. I'll leave a link below in the description so you can go check it out, but it is long. It has, I think, 10 different key points, and within each of those points, there's an entire laundry list of things that they want to do, changes that they want to make, things that they want to fund, and it's extensive. It really is extensive. This is probably going to take longer than I want it to take, but I just decided to go with a few key bullet points here. There's a few that did not make it in that I'm not going to talk about because I just had to stick with the most important things, because this video probably would have taken a good 40 minutes or so to really break down the entire thing. And I want to try to cut this down to at most 20 minutes. Hopefully we can get it much lower than that, because I really want to dive right into this. So I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen. All right. So key provisions. One of the main things that he's focusing on is enforcing the Civil Rights Act and continuing to desegregate schools. And you might be wondering, I thought they were already desegregated. Well, in effect, there are actually many issues with that. It's not always the case. We've made obviously a lot of major strides, but there are remaining issues. There are schools that are 90% black or 80% black, and in practice, it turns out that it's just not always the case. And there's a lot of there's also economic segregation, poor districts versus rich districts, which is probably the much larger issue. I saw this in my own school system. I went to public school my entire life, so I can attest to that. So he wants to enforce the Civil Rights Act, provide additional funding for transportation, Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, Title I program, and probably the most interesting here is the second bullet point I have there: a raise for all teachers to a minimum floor of $60,000. That's what teacher salaries would start at under this plan, and tie it to the cost of living with regular performance reviews and raises based on continuing education and things like that. Establish a national per student spending floor. I don't know right off the top of my head the specifics of that, as to, is it a spending floor for how much the federal government is spending, or is it a combined spending floor of state and federal funds? I'm not completely sure about that, so you can correct me in the comments and let me know if you know for sure about that. Provide resources needed to shrink class size. That's a big one. That is actually very, very important. Super, super important when we talk about making schools better and bettering education in this country, because oftentimes you have this massive problem where, even in my school, which was, not the worst school out there, but my average class size in AP classes was probably about 25 students. I had classes that were 30 students. This is terrible for education. It's probably one of the worst things about our education system. You go to other places in the world and they have class sizes of 15, even 10, and there was a school I went to briefly that was, it was a school for people that were disciplinary problems, and we had classes of 10, and I felt like that really helped kids connect with the teachers more. Let's see, going to the next one. Ensure that states cover fees associated with SATs, ACTs. Those are, big things for getting into college, and it kind of blows me away that that's not something that's covered, because it's really, really cheap. And it may only be like $60, but there are some people where, yeah, $60 is kind of a hindrance. Strengthen the Individuals with Disability Act. This is, all about increasing funding for special education classes, things like that. Ban for-profit charter schools. This is a big one, and this is one that I'd like to explain kind of in detail, because this is an area where I think Bernie is playing 4D chess, because I saw people trying to misleadingly make articles saying that Bernie is banning charter schools. He's not. He's banning for-profit charter schools, and this is an area where a more technocratic Democrat who thinks that this is a popular issue, as it probably is, might have just said, well, ban them outright. Fuck them. Just make it completely public. I mean, a lot of countries already do that. But Bernie is saying, okay, well, the right is going to blast you hard if you do that. So I'm going to come out and ban just for-profit charter schools and immediately halt the use of public funds to underwrite new charter schools. And so now they kind of, in effect, turn into nonprofit, almost charitable organizations. And another thing he puts in here is support efforts to unionize charter schools and make it so half of the board of charter schools are teachers and parents, and that charter schools follow the same oversight requirements as public schools. So essentially, he's almost turning charter schools into a semi-co-op model. And now, the reason I say this is playing 4D chess is because he's not doing the authoritarian move of saying ban charter schools altogether. He's putting conservatives on the defensive, because now, instead of coming out here and going on the offense and saying, fuck Bernie, he's banning charter schools, when some charter schools have been successful, now they have to come out and play defense and say why it's a bad thing that he's banning the profit motive. They have to explain, well, the profit motive actually makes schools better, when there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Because when you look at the decent studies on charter schools, it looks like most of them more or less, perform about the same as public schools. And then there's a small chunk of them that perform a little better on average. And then there's a slightly larger chunk of them that perform much worse on average. So in general, charter schools, very mixed bag, and there's no evidence that the profit motive is what makes the few good ones do good. So I thought that was a pretty good move by Bernie, putting conservatives on the defense on this issue rather than the offense, and giving them, more fire to work with. So that was pretty fucking genius, honestly. Serious credit to Bernie on that one. Spend $5 billion annually to substantially expand access to summer and after-school programs. Let me go put that back up for you. My bad. This one's a pretty good one. I like that one because, this is another thing that could appeal to conservatives, because they're always bitching and moaning about, these kids are, they're getting into crime and doing drugs and stuff because they don't have any structure in their life, and they don't have any male role models. Well, okay, now you fund summer programs and things to keep kids out of crime and out of doing drugs and being on the streets and shit whenever they don't have parents or don't have this or that growing up, and you give them more opportunities to be around other kids and be around adult supervision and shit. So that's something that I think it could definitely go well with some conservatives, or you could probably get them interested in that. Provide year-round free universal school meals, breakfast, lunch, and snacks. That's pretty interesting. Just the concept of providing meals over the summer is pretty interesting, because a lot of kids who grow up in poverty, they may not necessarily always have access to quality meals, and if they could just, if they're within walking distance to the school, or they could get a ride to the school, or however they plan to distribute these meals, that's access to more food, and you can cut down on the fact that, yes, in this country, we have a serious child poverty issue. Fight to transform our education system into a high-quality public good that connects education, health, and social services to young people, a full-service approach to learning and well-being. This is another interesting thing that does not go super deep into specifics, but the idea basically is that you expand on what the role school plays in youth activities, and basically make it kind of a hub of just general well-being for young people. So this is kind of the idea that instead of just making school into largely kind of a forced they're much like prisons, where you're forced to go there and learn under very strict rubrics, take standardized tests and stuff, and they kind of like file you in and out of everything, and it's just very obnoxious. Having schools with access to after-school tutoring and summer programs, after-school programs, health programs, and various social services for parents, and just have a general hub of different social aspects to this rather than just being education. Again, this is something that could appeal to conservatives because it is a way to keep kids out of the potential of criminality and drugs and etc. So strengthening schools to be kind of just a center for general youth well-being, it's a good idea. I would like to hear more details about that specifically because, again, it doesn't go very deeply into specifics. But that also, another thing I didn't put on the graphic is that they want to provide $5 billion a year in funding to explore this and fund these community-driven schools. So that's super interesting. Let's go back over. Last but not least, we got close the gap in school infrastructure funding to renovate, modernize, and green the nation's schools. So, green infrastructure, bring that on in. So this is an extensive plan, and like I said, there are many things that I didn't cover here that I didn't include in this little breakdown. You can go read it yourself, but honestly, most of this, the vast majority of this, I'm feeling very strongly about. And of course, universal public college tuition plays into this as well. It's mentioned. They also mentioned how standardized tests are a very negative thing, and they have a lot of drawbacks. And I would have liked Bernie to have a specific line item that says we're going to just get the fuck rid of standardized tests because standardized tests are terrible. And there's countries that have completely dropped them and shown that they're just better off. In terms of educational outcomes, they're just better off. Standardized tests is educated guessing, and it doesn't require that you actually necessarily learn the material and know what you're putting down. You should have to actually write a real answer and explain your answer rather than, just educated guessing. I would like to get rid of standardized tests. I wish he had specifically put that out as a line item. We're going to get rid of that, but they did have a little bit of language in there, so maybe that is on the agenda. I don't know. But in general, I'm feeling very positively about this. I don't think any candidate has an education plan that is this robust. And one of the things I'm really waiting on from Bernie is a robust plan on his Green New Deal. How does he want to implement that? Obviously, I'm for the Green New Deal. Obviously, I'm for a complete revamping of our infrastructure. I just want to know what investments specifically is he going to make, and how many jobs are we going to create? What is the spending profile on this? And what is the timetable on this? So please, Bernie, put that out. I really want to know because, there's already other candidates like Jay Inslee who has put out his environmental proposals, and I want to see yours, Bernie. Put them out. This education one looking very strong so far, looking very strong. Please give me your comments below. What do you think of this? What do you like? What do you dislike? Where would you like changes to be made? And let's start a discussion about this. Join me on Discord. My Discord server link is in the description below. We're going to be slowly growing that and adding channels on as time passes. So thank you so much for joining me.